The movie begins with the sound of ocean waves. We see a woman named Jess, holding her crying young son Tommy close to her chest. She comforts him, telling him that it was just a big, bad dream. She says we all have bad dreams, and this was just one of them. Jess is preparing for a sailing trip. When she goes outside to collect her dry laundry, she finds Tommy's toy, a small boat, broken and lying in his swimming pool. She picks it up and brings it inside. Meanwhile, in the house, Tommy accidentally knocks over his paint. As Jess is cleaning up the mess, the doorbell rings. But when she goes to answer it, there is no one there. She asks her neighbor if he saw anyone, but he denies it. Coming back inside, Jess tells Tommy they have to go. He refuses, seeming upset and scared. Jess assures him that everything is okay and that she has cleaned everything up. She then picks him up and carries him to the car. Then, we see Jess putting something into the trunk of a taxi and driving off. The scene then shifts to a marina, focusing on a sign that says Triangle. Here we meet Greg and Sally. Sally has arrived with her boyfriend, Downey, and their friend Victor. Just then, Greg spots Jess arriving with a taxi driver. Jess comes aboard and greets her friend, Greg, who asks her why she looks so troubled and tired. Jess brushes it off, simply blaming fatigue. Soon, they all set sail, moving the boat out into the open sea. Once they are underway, Jess falls asleep on the deck. She has a strange, disturbing dream. In it, she is on a beach surrounded by crabs and insects. Suddenly, she wakes up, and Heather asks if she is feeling okay. But Jess doesn't elaborate on her dream. Elsewhere on the boat, Victor mentions to Greg that Jess was supposed to bring her son along, but didn't. She had said her son was in school, even though it's a Saturday. Greg suggests that maybe Tommy goes to a special school and tells Victor not to make a big deal out of it. Later, Jess and Victor join the others. Greg starts giving Jess a casual lesson on how to steer the boat. Everyone is having a good time, enjoying the sail, when suddenly the sea becomes eerily calm. The weather begins to turn for the worse. In the distance, they see a massive storm approaching. Greg rushes to the control room, trying to get in touch with the Coast Guard. But instead of a response, he hears the frantic, distorted voice of a girl on the radio screaming, "Please come back! She is going to kill us all." Greg is confused and terrified by the message. Before he can process it, the storm is upon them. The violent winds and waves violently overturn their boat. The group fights for their lives in the churning water. Thanks to their life jackets, they all manage to clamber onto the overturned hull of their boat, all except Heather, who is lost to the storm and drowns. As the storm finally subsides, the survivors see a glimmer of hope. A large, seemingly empty ocean liner named the Aeolus drifts towards them. They wave their arms and shout for help, desperately trying to get the attention of anyone on board. But the massive ship just sails silently past them, ignoring their pleas. But they don't give up. They manage to swim and climb their way onto the enormous vessel. Once on board, they are met with an eerie silence. The ship is completely deserted. There is no one to be seen. Greg announces that he will go to the control room to try and contact the Coast Guard. But Jess stops him, telling him she has a strange feeling, a powerful déjà vu, as if she has been on this ship before. Greg dismisses it, saying she must be in shock from the accident. As they begin to search the ship, Victor and Greg come across a framed picture. It is a painting of this very ship, the Aeolus. Below the painting, a plaque tells a story from Greek mythology. It says that Aeolus was the son of a god. The plaque recounts the story of Sisyphus, a man who cheated death not once, but twice. Sisyphus made a promise to the god of death to return to the underworld, but he broke his promise. Enraged, the god of death punished him for all eternity. His punishment was to push a giant boulder up a steep hill. But every time he neared the top, the boulder would roll all the way back down, forcing him to start his task over again, forever. As the group is reading this strange story, Sally tells them to keep moving. Just then, they all hear a loud clanging sound. Victor runs to investigate and finds a single key lying on the ground. They are all confused. How did this key get here? They assume that their missing friend, Heather, must be on the ship and must have dropped it. They decide to search for her. Their search leads them to a grand dining room. They are shocked by what they find. The long tables are set with plates of fresh, steaming food, as if a banquet has just been prepared for guests who never arrived. Greg checks the time and discovers another mystery. Victor's watch has stopped at 11:30, but Jess's watch stopped much earlier, at 8. Suddenly, Jess sees a shadowy figure running down a corridor. She alerts the others. Victor immediately runs after the figure, with Jess and Greg following close behind him. Sally and Downey decide to stay behind in the dining room. As Jess and Greg are chasing after Victor, they hear a terrifying scream coming from the dining room they just left. They rush back, only to find the room empty. Sally and Downey are gone, but written on a mirror in what looks like fresh blood are the words, "Go to the theater." Greg immediately wants to go to the theater, but Jess, terrified, begs him not to. They argue, but Greg insists on finding their friends and heads for the theater alone. Meanwhile, we see that Sally and Downey had also left the dining room after finding bloodstains in the hallway. Following the trail, they too arrive at the theater. Back in the dining room, Jess is now alone. She notices that all the fresh food that was on the tables just moments ago has now completely rotted away, as if it has been sitting for years. Before she can process this, wounded Victor staggers into the room. He is bleeding and in a panic. He lunges at Jess, trying to choke her with his hands. Jess fights back desperately, defending herself. In the struggle, she manages to overpower Victor, and he falls to the floor, dead. As Jess stands there in shock, she hears the sound of a gunshot coming from the direction of the theater. She runs towards the sound. When she bursts into the theater, she finds a horrifying scene. Greg is lying on the floor, shot dead. Downey and Sally are there, alive but terrified. The moment Sally sees Jess, she points a finger at her and screams, accusing her. She tells Downey that Jess is the one who shot Greg. Jess is completely bewildered. She has no idea what Sally is talking about. And then, Downey says the same thing, confirming the accusation. They both saw her do it. Downey accuses Jess, asking her why she told them that Greg was calling for them in the theater. Jess is utterly confused and horrified by this accusation. She never said any such thing. Before she can defend herself, a gunshot rings out from the back of the theater. A masked figure emerges and coldly shoots and kills both Sally and Downey. The masked assailant then turns the gun on Jess, but she manages to escape in the chaos, running for her life. She flees through the ship's corridors and finds her way into the kitchen, where she grabs a large knife for protection. She then runs up a staircase, trying to get to a higher deck. But the masked killer is right behind her. He corners her on the upper deck and attacks her, causing her to drop the knife. He points his shotgun at her, but when he pulls the trigger, the gun only clicks. It is out of ammunition. Seeing her chance, Jess tries to run. As she does, she spots a fire axe on the wall. She grabs it and, in a desperate struggle, uses it to wound the masked figure severely. With the killer lying injured on the deck, Jess demands to know who he is. The masked person, in a strained voice, tells her, "You have to kill them all. It's the only way you can get home." But Jess, terrified and repulsed, doesn't listen. She pushes the wounded killer over the railing, and he falls into the ocean below. As Jess catches her breath, she looks out at the sea and is struck by an impossible sight. In the distance, she sees her own overturned sailboat, and on it she can see Greg, Victor, Sally, Downey, and Heather, all alive and well, waving for help. They are just arriving at the Aeolus. Jess is frozen in shock and confusion, but we, the audience, begin to understand. Jess is trapped in a time loop. She watches in horror as the new group, which includes a version of herself, boards the ship and begins to act out the exact same sequence of events she just lived through. She sees this new Jess experiencing déjà vu, and she watches Greg and Victor find the painting of Sisyphus. Overwhelmed, Jess sinks to the floor, and as she does, the key she took from Victor falls from her pocket. She runs and hides in a room, where she sees the bloody message, "Go to the theater," already written on the mirror. She realizes she is now on the other side of the events, witnessing the loop from a new perspective. While hiding, she sees the new version of herself from the current group walking in the dining hall. Victor spots her and begins to chase her. She runs up to the new version of Victor and tries to explain everything, to stop the cycle. But Victor, who is just beginning this nightmare, is frightened and confused. He doesn't understand and doesn't believe a word. In a panic, she shoves Victor away, causing him to hit his head against a wall and fall, dazed. The hiding Jess stumbles away and finds a secluded room. Inside, she makes a chilling discovery. There are hundreds of notes, all in her own handwriting, repeating the same phrase, "Kill them all." She finds a pen, and almost against her will, her hand begins to write the same words. She also finds a pile of identical lockets, just like the one she wears, and a shotgun. In this moment, the full horrifying truth dawns on her. She has been trapped in this loop not for hours, but for what seems like an eternity, reliving the same horrors over and over again. She decides that this time, she will break the pattern. She will do whatever it takes to get back to her son. She takes the shotgun and leaves the room, determined to follow the masked killer's advice. She finds Victor and is about to shoot him, but she hesitates. Just then, she hears the voice of the new Jess from the current group. Her focus shifts, and a new terrifying plan forms in her mind. She decides she must kill her other self to break the cycle. She chases the sound of the voice, with Victor following her. She corners the new Jess and raises the gun, but at the last second, she cannot bring herself to pull the trigger. The new Jess seizes the opportunity to run away. The hiding Jess then tries to help the wounded Victor, but it is too late, and he dies in her arms. At that moment, we see the masked killer, who we now understand was a previous version of Jess, shooting Greg in the theater. Hearing that gunshot, Jess runs to the theater and manages to pull Sally to safety, away from her other murderous self. In a moment of clarity, she realizes that if she can change the established pattern of events, she might be able to break the loop. She gives her shotgun to Sally and Downey and gives them a desperate instruction. She tells them not to trust anyone and to shoot anyone they see. She then runs towards the upper decks of the ship. Meanwhile, Downey and Sally, now left alone and terrified, hear a noise. Thinking it is the killer, they panic and fire the shotgun. The sound draws Jess's attention and she runs towards them. But she is too late. The masked Jess has already found them. This time, the masked killer removes her hood, revealing herself to be Jess. She tries to convince Sally and Downey to come with her, speaking calmly. Our Jess shouts at them, trying to warn them. But the masked Jess tells them to ignore the voice and leads them into a room. Once inside, the masked Jess suddenly and violently turns on them, stabbing them with a knife. Downey is killed instantly, but Sally manages to escape. She runs to the ship's control room, desperately trying to radio for help. She grabs the microphone and pleads, "Please help us. She is going to kill us all." We now understand that the distorted, frantic voice that Greg heard on the radio at the very beginning of the film was Sally's. She was trying to warn her own incoming group. Our Jess arrives at the control room, but Sally, seeing her, mistakes her for the masked killer and flees in terror. Sally runs all the way to the ship's highest deck, with Jess following close behind, trying to explain. But when Jess reaches the top, she freezes in horror. The deck is littered with the decaying bodies of countless Sallys. It is a grisly monument to the countless failed cycles. The masked Jess, and all the Jesses before her, have tried to break the pattern by saving Sally, but they have always failed. Our Jess tries to reason with Sally, but it is no use. As they stand there, they both look down and witness a shocking scene on a lower deck. Two versions of Jess are fighting each other. One of them overpowers the other and throws her overboard into the sea. At the same moment, the wounded Sally on the upper deck finally succumbs to her injuries and dies. The moment all the passengers are dead, the loop instantly resets. Jess looks out at the ocean and sees her overturned sailboat once again, with Greg, Victor, Sally, Downey, and a new, innocent version of herself all waving for help. The cycle is beginning all over again. Jess now fully accepts the horrific truth. The only way to progress through the loop and get a chance to go home is to ensure that everyone on the ship dies. She walks into a stateroom, and with a bloody finger, she writes the words, "Go to the theater" on the mirror. She then goes to the dining room and finds the new Sally and Downey. She lies to them, just as her past self was lied to, telling them that Greg is calling for them in the theater. She then puts on the mask and the hood, fully becoming the masked killer. She goes to the theater and one by one shoots Greg and then Sally and Downey. She then turns her gun on the new innocent Jess who has just arrived. But this new Jess is quicker. She manages to escape the theater and runs for her life. The chase repeats itself just as it always has. The masked Jess corners the new Jess on the upper deck. They fight, and the masked Jess is eventually overpowered and thrown over the railing by the new version of herself. The loop has repeated once again. The masked Jess, our Jess, now wounded, sinks beneath the waves. But instead of drowning, her eyes suddenly snap open. She finds herself washed ashore on a beach, the very same beach she saw in her dream at the beginning of the trip. Realizing where she is, she immediately gets up and runs towards her home. When she arrives, she peers through the windows and witnesses a heartbreaking scene. Another version of herself, the original Jess from this timeline, is inside, screaming at Tommy for breaking his autopilot toy. Tommy, who is painting, spots the wet, bedraggled Jess hiding outside and is terrified. In his fear, he accidentally knocks over his paint. The Jess inside the house becomes enraged by the mess and starts hitting Tommy. The Jess outside sees this abuse and is filled with a desperate fury. She rings the doorbell. When the domestic Jess comes to the door and finds no one there, the outside Jess seizes her chance. She slips inside the house, grabs a hammer, and in a brutal and shocking attack, she murders the Jess who lived in that house. Little Tommy witnesses this entire horrifying event. The new Jess then holds her crying son close, comforting him and telling him he just had a big bad dream. Exactly as we saw at the very beginning of the film. We now understand the profound sadness in that first scene. She was crying not just for his nightmare, but for the horrific act she had just committed to be with him. She then loads the body of the dead Jess into the trunk of her car and takes Tommy with her, intending to dispose of the corpse. As she drives, a seagull smashes into the windshield, startling her. She pulls over to clean it off but makes a grim discovery. The side of the road is littered with the bodies of many other seagulls, all killed in the exact same way. She realizes with dread that this drive itself is another loop, another inescapable cycle. Shaken, she gets back in the car. The blood from the seagull is still smeared on the windshield, and the sight of it terrifies Tommy, causing him to scream. Distracted by his cries, Jess loses control of the car. It swerves and crashes violently into an oncoming truck. The impact throws the body from the trunk onto the road, and tragically, Tommy is killed in the accident. Jess, however, survives. As she stumbles from the wreckage, a taxi driver arrives on the scene. He asks her if she is okay. In a daze, she says yes. He then offers her a ride, and she numbly accepts, asking to be taken to the harbor. She is going back to the sailboat, the Triangle, to start the entire oceanic loop over again, hoping that this time, she might somehow save her son. The taxi driver, who seems to know more than he should, asks her if she will be coming back. She tells him, "Yes, I'll be back." She meets Victor at the dock, and when he asks about her son, she lies and says Tommy is in school, even though it's a Saturday. Greg arrives and notices how upset she looks, and she brushes him off, blaming tiredness, just as she did before. She boards the yacht, and as it sails out into the open water, the film ends. The loop is still active, and her eternal punishment continues, with no end in sight. But you might be wondering, why did this eternal punishment begin in the first place? What sin could possibly deserve such a fate? The truth lies in the life she left on shore. Jess was not a loving mother. She was abusive, impatient, and mentally tortured her special needs son, Tommy. The constant stress and resentment had broken her. In a fit of rage after the car crash that killed them both, she made a deal, or perhaps was given a sentence by a higher power, a god of death, or fate itself. The punishment was a twisted lesson built from the myth of Sisyphus. She would be given a single, desperate goal: to get back to her son. But the only path to him would force her to confront endless versions of herself and commit unspeakable acts. The entity took her child, and now, she must push her boulder up the hill for all eternity, forever trying to reach a salvation she can never truly earn, all to teach her the value of a love she once threw away. On IMDb, this movie was rated by 144,000 people and has an average rating of 6.9. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel for more interesting videos. See you in the next one.